So we're learning the Hagaddah of Pesach. We're learning the masterpiece, probably the most engaged Jewish text. Actually, maybe that's not true. Maybe the Siddur is a more engaged Jewish text. But in one time period, definitely the Hagaddah of Pesach, the Seder night, as we call it here in Canada, Seder night in Canada, is the most engaged Jewish text. And to appreciate it, to understand it, the depth of it, that we can make for ourselves a wonderful Seder is what our goal is over here. And so hopefully we'll come away with wonderful things. Yesterday we began with the beginning of Magid, reciting the Haggadah, and we started with the Helach Ma'anya, of the beginning statement, the statement of what we're engaged in and what this is all about. And what is it all about? We said this is the bread of affliction. Just a brief review so we can remind ourselves of what we learned yesterday. This is the bread of affliction that was eaten by our ancestors in the land of Israel. What does it mean that this is? How could this be the bread of affliction? This might be like the bread of affliction, and some people, that's how it's written in their Haggadah, kaha. But in the Alter Rebbe's teachings in Haggadah, it's this is. How could it be? This bread is not 3,000 years old that we are eating on Pesach night. But this is because this is an experience that we need to go through. This is not just a story that happened to our ancestors, but it's a story that's happening to us. We need to be liberated. We need to go out of our bondage, of our Egypt. And as we explained, how do we do that? Through the matzah. The matzah, first of all, is flat, so it shows on humility. And it's also, we call it the bread of affliction. When we can chew on the affliction in life, the challenges of life, and we can munch on it, and then take the nutrients from what we munch on, and that it gives us vitality, and we get rid of what we need to get rid of, then that will help us to get out of our bondage and to become liberated. And from there, we'll be able to make a statement: whoever is hungry, let them come and eat. What do you mean, whoever is hungry? Whoever is in need, I could be there for them. When I'm restricted and I'm in my own bondage, I don't feel someone else's needs, not their physical needs, hunger, or whoever is in need to make a Pesach Seder. I'm not going to feel those needs. I'm not going to be capable of feeling the needs of another because I'm restricted and limited and I'm in bondage. But once I'm freed from that bondage, then now I can truly sense someone else's material needs, come and eat. Someone else's spiritual needs, come and observe the Pesach. I can truly connect to another individual, right? And who is it that we're connecting? We say whoever. The human condition is that I like to connect to people that I'm comfortable to connect with. People are my own ilk. If I'm very religious, I want very religious people to connect to. If I'm very not religious, I want to connect with very not religious people. Or if I'm, skiers like to hang out with skiers, Hollywood likes to hang out with people in Hollywood and so on. But here we make a statement, no, whoever. Doesn't matter who's going to sit at my table. Who doesn't matter who has a need. If I can help materially, if I can help spiritually in someone else's needs, that's being freed from my bondage, being liberated to be able to say whoever, right? And then from there we will go to the land of Israel. Land of Israel represents holiness. That means we have the divine presence in our lives. That means we have risen beyond the human condition, and we have divinity in our lives, the divine light in our lives. And therefore, this year we are slaves, but next year we will be free. So, but then it's not sufficient that I might be personally, but collectively we also need to be. In other words, I might be free from my bondage, from my things that are the box that I live in, the things that hold me back. And maybe I become liberated, but that's not good enough. We all need to be free from it. So I need to be not only a living example, but a teacher of it in any way that I can. So that's just a brief review of what we learned yesterday. Powerful idea of the very first chapter, the very first, couple of lines of the Haggadah of the story, that telling us that we need to experience this personally. We need to be able to be liberated from our bondage, from our box that we live in with our limitations, whatever those limitations might be. We are all aware of the challenges we have in life. Now we're going to go to the next part, and I'd like some participation over here. That's the Ma Nishtana, the 4 questions. Now, we all must have memories, either memories from last year when we were like, last year, who said the Ma Nishtana? You know who the youngest in my family last year was? My wife. Because there's only me and my wife. That's what we had. You know what, though? We weren't in bondage. We felt so free. It was an amazing experience. Now, being my wife is younger than me, she had to say the Ma Nishtana first. And then, I said the Ma Nishtana. So the Ma Nishtana, the 4 questions, and the Jewish custom in many households is that you start with the youngest and you go from there to until, you become embarrassed to say it. Ultimately, we all have to say the Ma Nishtana. Even the leader of the household needs to say it, because after all, what is this night different than all other nights, right? Ma Nishtana. So before we get into it, I want to give you a whole new look on this Ma Nishtana. I'd like to have some conversation over here. I'd like to have some input. We have people on Zoom. We have people on Facebook that are engaged over here. And I'd like to have your personal experience, whether it was last year, the Ma Nishtana, or something in your childhood. So we have in Clubhouse over here. We have, again, on Facebook and on Zoom. We got a lot of different platforms. Avram, please share.
I know, just getting ready for to share once something comes up. I really have nothing to share yet. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Whenever you're ready. Anybody in Clubhouse would like to share something, please put up your hand so I can see. And Rabbi Bernath, maybe you can help anybody that needs to come in. By all means, anybody on Zoom want to share something from their personal experience? Again, whether last year or whether when you were a child, something that stands out, something that was a meaningful experience about the Ma Nishtana. Like, I know for me, when I've had in the past some grandchildren over, and to see the not just my children, but my grandchildren, the 3rd generation, that they are enthusiastic, that they're engaged, and the highlight in the engagement, at least at the beginning, is the Ma Nishtana. So anybody, not all at once. Single file. Richard, go ahead.
Well, I can say last
One second, Avram.
Last year was
one second, Avram. Sorry.
Year for Passover.
What?
Last year was an interesting year for Passover, considering we had to do it online. And what I'd say is that my cousins and my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nephew, we all did the Ma Nishtana. We all did it, and then we did the story afterwards. We all read it out loud online. And although we weren't together, it still had the same power that it did when we were together as a group physically.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Sorry, Avram, go ahead on Clubhouse.
Hello, Rabbi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I just think it's beautiful. Thank you. It's really beautiful how Pesach, Passover, it's a beautiful time for all the family to get together, and there's nothing better than that. However, last year was so beautiful and unique in the way that we really spent time with our own family. I have 3 little ones. Last year was 2 little ones. And to just spend the Seder with my 2-year-old, my 1-year-old, my wife, and that's it. There was nothing like it. And that's probably not going to happen again. Last year, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I'm doing this every year. This year is like, I have Rahmanis on my wife. I'm not making her make Pesach. I wouldn't do that to her. So we're going to the in-laws. But it was just the most beautiful Seder.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Reet, I think I see your hand up, no? Go ahead, share with us. All right. Oh, there you. Am I having a challenge over here? Okay.
I'll be fine. If you want to make me the admin, I can or moderator, sorry, I can help you out.
Okay, thank you. How do I go click on you and make a moderator? Okay, thank you. Beautiful. Okay. So anybody else to share? Otherwise, we're going to go into a teachings over here, and maybe based on this teachings, we'll then have much more to have a discussion and share together. Oops. All right. You read? Okay. So let us go into the Hagaddah. And what makes this night different than all other nights? If anybody has a Hagaddah in front of them, you can. So let us read the words. What is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we are not accustomed to dip. We need not dip even once. On this night, we do so twice. On all other nights, we eat chametz or matzah, and on this night, only matzah. On all other nights, we eat any kind of vegetables, and on this night, morer, bitter herbs. And all other nights, we eat sitting upright or reclining. And on this night, we are reclined. So those are the 4 questions I'm sure we're familiar with. So first of all, for those who might have a different Hagaddah, the order is actually a little different. The first question we ask in the Chabad Hagaddah is actually about dipping, which is only a custom. Most Haggadahs, or many of them, the first question is about chametz and matzah, eating matzah on Passover as opposed to chametz, which is the leavened bread that's forbidden to eat during the 8 days of Passover. So again, most Haggadahs speak about that biblical law. The main thing of the night is matzah, and that's the first thing. But in our Hagaddah, the first thing is about dipping, which is only a custom. It's not even rabbinic law. So the Rebbe gives an interesting insight to this. You know, everybody has things that are memorable from their youth, in any way of life. You know, whether it's tradition that you have kept in the family, whether of Jewish tradition or just things of the family nature, or things that stand out. So in Jewish tradition, some of the things that people stand out, I know with my kids, is, on the eve of Yom Kippur, Kaparis, may not be the most PC thing, but, about caning, atonement through a live chicken, right? Or Simchas Torah, dancing on Simchas Torah, or masquerading on Purim. All of these things are mere customs, but they stand out in particular. When we commit ourselves to things that are not just of biblical nature, things that are, this I got to do because, this is biblical, but this is, it's only, it's only a custom. It's not so important. But yet when a child sees that we are committed even to things that are just merely a custom, and we're dedicated to them, it makes a deep impression upon them on how deeply a parent or an adult would be committed when the child sees that. So that's one of the lessons that we learn out over here, that the first thing is the dipping. The dipping is only, again, a custom. Dipping, the karpas, the onion or the potato in the salt water, and later on dipping the bitter herbs and haraisis into the mixture of wine and apples and pears. A custom. But when small little things in life we're dedicated to, then we recognize, the children who are watching, and this is the 4 questions, right? So it's the time for the children to shine. They recognize that the small things in life you take seriously, then that means everything has a value and importance. If we only take the big things in life and make them important, then we're missing out. And that's a message over here. Sometimes a simple little thing, just saying hello to somebody, when you're going to shop and you're going, and the cashier who's putting everything through for you, and it's a small thing, just say hello to that person, ask them, how's your day? Not a big thing. No, not even a biblical command to do it, right? You don't have to do it. It's a nice thing to do, to be accustomed to do. You don't know what, first of all, how you can affect that person's life. You don't know how, if you took your child with you and they saw you do that, how they will think of you. That, wow, just a cashier who, how important is that person to you in your life? But yet you reach out to them and just with a hello and how are you? The small things sometimes really show us how great we are. Indeed, they do. Any questions or comments on that? Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to share something about that before we continue with another teaching over here?
Well, in the beginning, it was a little bit difficult to join because I couldn't get a speaker.
Oh, okay.
You were asking about also experiences of the cider.
Yes.
Well, yes. Last year, I told in a few other rooms that I'm working in a Jewish hospice, and because of all the COVID things, people couldn't go. Some people who wanted to join with their family, it was very difficult. So I actually went to the hospice to do the ciders together with a woman in her 90s, a Holocaust survivor.
Wow.
And she was actually the one who was singing Ma Nishtana. It was amazing. And it was such a different cider than all the other years. So,
wow. Being there for others in such a way is amazing.
Yeah. And in the end, she didn't pass away. She went to a retirement home. She was actually doing okay in the end. But it was an exceptional evening. It was really special, and for her to read, with the Hagaddah in front of her, and she was a little bit shivering and, saying the words a little bit off, but it was so special. It was really amazing.
Beautiful.
Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. Okay, so to make things, how is it that the small things in life that we can notice and focus in on, the things that, how do we get there? How's that possible? Where do we get the talent for that? So maybe we can take another understanding from the teachings over here. Again, the first thing of the 4 questions is about dipping. The word dipping in Hebrew is tefillah. Tefillah, tibul is the root word. It also, the very same words of immersing, dipping, is also the same words as bittul, self-effacement. Bittul meaning self-abnegation. What does that mean? It means it's not about me. There's something greater than me that I am here to engage in. It's not about even me having an experience here. It's about me being what I gotta be. And when I could put aside even the experience, everybody's looking for an experience. You're looking for an experience and you're looking for something big. Small things get lost. But if it's about being, small and big are both important. So the small thing, I'm able to focus in on and be there. And ultimately, that's the beginning of this divine route or divine path, is through the dipping, through the tefillah, through the bittul, the self-effacement, the selflessness, about recognizing that I'm here not for my experience, but I'm here for something greater than that I can achieve over here. That's a selflessness. And then I can, recognize when someone is going through something. It might even be small, might even not be big, but I'll be able to be attuned to it as a result. So that is actually ties in, beautiful idea over here. Let's go now another step in understanding the 4 questions. And this is going to be a completely a mystical ride. Right now, what I expressed, teachings from our dear Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, and now what we're going to go through a mystical journey from the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, how he explains this, and it's got to do with Ma Nishtana halayla, what's different this night. Elie Wiesel, may he rest in peace, blessed memory. He wrote a book called Night, and it was about his Holocaust experience. Why does he call it night? Because night is darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. Darkness is a time of exile, time of bondage. For Elie Wiesel, that was, of course, his time that he spent in the camps. So, Ma Nishtana halayla hazeh is really saying, what is different this night, this exile, this bondage, than all other bondages, all other exiles? Now, to give perspective on this, the Jewish people have gone through a series of bondage, slavery, exiles, right? The first one, of course, in Egypt, we had the bondage, then the destruction of the first holy temple by the Babylonians in the 6th century before the Common Era. That's over 2,500 years ago. And then we had the Persian, after the Babylonian, the Persian, which is the story of Purim, Persian exile. So Babylonian, Persian exile, and then the Greek exile, the times of the Greeks for those, the story of Hanukkah, of course. And then this final one, which is almost 2,000 years, painful years of exile, which is the Roman Empire that destroyed the Second Holy Temple in the year 69 of the Common Empire, right? So the question over here is a different question. And by the way, who's this a question addressed to? So we have a custom of saying in Yiddish, Tate, ich will bei dir fragen the 4 questions. Father, I want to ask by you the 4 questions. What happens if your father's not there? What happens if my father is passed on? What happens if there isn't a father at the table? So who are you addressing? Well, our ultimate father, God. We need to understand that he's Avinu Malkeinu, he's our king, but he's also our father, and we need to have a relationship with him as an awesome, mighty king, but at the same time as a gentle, loving father. So we're asking him, as a child, each and every one of us is in a simplistic, childish way, as a child needs their father, as a child wants their father and wants a simple connection. And what are we asking? What is this night, the present exile, and the redemption that's going to come from this night, the day that will come after the darkness? What is different than all of the other nights, meaning all of the other exiles? We've gone through a lot, right? We only, Jewish people are only, over 4,000 years old. And of that, we only had over 800 years. And even of the 800 years, and we're really completely freedom in times of divine, revelation and divine open connection in the holy temples. But most of our times has been a time of night, a time of exile. So what's the difference between this one and the previous ones? So dipping, what do we say? On all other nights, we're not accustomed to dip even once. So dipping refers to, like, why do you dip into something? Is you're trying to take what and you're dipping to wash away some negativity that might be there, right? You wash a fruit, right? You dip into the salt water. Is the exercise of negating, as dipping we said it was a bittul, as abnegating impurity, the impurity that there might be. So there's two types of impurity that we have because we live in exile, we live in a state of confusion, we live in a state of darkness. And there's two things that can be impurified, both the body and the soul. So therefore we have to dip twice. All other nights we don't. Why? Only now we dip twice, because now we are coming to the final redemption. And we are now going through a journey in our lives, individually and collectively, of becoming purified in a way that body and soul will come out of it complete. In other exiles, we didn't come out of it complete, body and soul. What's the proof? We went into another exile. So we had the first Babylonian exile. We got redeemed from it. But then we went into another exile. We went into another stage of night, stage of confusion, a stage of disconnect. But then we got out of it. Each time we got out, we got out of exile, we got redeemed. But this final one will be a final redemption. Mashiach, Messianic times, where the world will become pure, totally pure. That's what the dipping is. And in that dipping, that means we're going to go through challenges. We're going to go through salt water. What does salt water represent? It's a little bitterness. In other words, there is a bitterness that we have to taste in order to grow, like we learned in the previous idea of halachmanya, right? That we learned there, that bitterness that comes our way, we have to know that challenge, that darkness, that difficulty, that thing that I don't really like, is actually something that's going to bring me to a greater light. That if I deal with that harsh situation, or even sometimes a harsh person, if I deal with it in a healthy way, I will come out of it a much stronger and better person. That's what the dipping is represented over here. So we dip twice because we will become really sort of cleansed or purified. You know, our experiences that we're going through, they will be growing experiences. They will not bring us down. They will elevate us and bring us up. The second point is, in all other nights we eat chametz or matzah, meaning in all other previous redemptions, our divine service involved chametz. Chametz is, like the Wonder Bread that's full of air, right? Which is meaning self-orientation. Being the self-orientation of the animal soul and of the body that we spoke about earlier. As well as matzah, which represents selflessness, because matzah is flat. It represents humility. So on all other nights, we eat both. In other words, we have humility sometimes, and sometimes we don't have humility. Sometimes we're bloated like that Wonder Bread that's full of air, right? You ever took the Wonder Bread and you squeeze it? You squeeze it and you got it becomes like maybe a tenth of the size. Why? It's full of air. So we are also sometimes full of air. We're full of ourselves, being self-oriented. That's the nature of all other nights. Not this night. We're going to get through this night. And you know what it's going to be? It's going to be only matzah. Matzah representing our godly nature, our goodness. That we will come out of this only from this present exile. We will come out of this and we're not going to be self-oriented. We're going to be God-oriented, which means, what does it mean, God-oriented? That what God needs from me is the center of my universe, not what I want. Right now, we fluctuate between what I want and what I'm needed for. What we are going to come out of this is a world that I will live and I will be led into, of where I just see what I'm needed for, and I'm there, totally engaged with my purpose of what I'm needed for. Then finally, in all other nights, we skip the bitter stuff right now, or it's another conversation for another time. All other nights, so eating, what do we do? All other nights we eat either sitting upright or reclined. Eating represents pleasure, right? That's physical pleasure. One of the reasons we eat, right? Sometimes we eat with our eyes, not with our stomachs, because it looks so good, and we eat so much, sometimes too much, right? But so eating is physical pleasure that it's an analogy for ultimately the spiritual pleasure. Now, reclining is also the idea of pleasure. That's why the kings of yore, they would eat reclined, which showing a great pleasure that they're engaged in, as opposed to sitting upright. So what does that mean? All other nights, we either sit upright or reclined. In other words, we're having pleasure, but the pleasure is not complete. So there's physical pleasure, and then reclining representing the spiritual pleasure. That the physical pleasure of eating, we sometimes do it upright, but this night we do it only reclining, right? We're supposed to recline when we eat the matzah, when we have the 4 cups of wine. Why? What does that represent? Ultimate pleasure. That the material world and the spiritual world will fuse as one, that I won't distinguish between physical pleasure and spiritual pleasure, because there'll be something so much greater than both of them, the pleasure of the divine, that I will experience. It will fuse those two together. And that's what reclining represents. The eating, reclined, meaning eating the physical pleasure, which eating brings. Recline, which reclining is the spiritual pleasure that that it's analogous to. And meaning that the two will come together, the ultimate pleasure. Because you know what? In life, everybody wants pleasure. The question is, what's pleasure? Can I have pleasure from eating a sweet apple? Can I have pleasure from music? Can I have a pleasure from an idea? The ultimate pleasure is divine pleasure. Divine pleasure will take the pleasure of the apple, the music, and a spiritual idea, and be able to meld them and fuse them together as one, and that you will experience something totally divine. That's the 4th level. That is the reclining, and that is the Ma Nishtana. It's a very different Ma Nishtana that we will have this year, hopefully. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? I want conversation now. We have on, oh, wow, got a nice group over here. I got so engaged, I didn't know where I am. So we have on Zoom a crowd. We have over here on Clubhouse, we have a crowd. I'd like to open up for conversation, any questions, any thoughts. Again, people bring your own personal experience of the Ma Nishtana or your Pesach Seder that you had either last year or in your youth, something that's memorable. Please share. All right. Not all at once, though, please. That would be overwhelming. How we doing? Anybody here on Clubhouse, please? Mendel. Rabbi Bernath, anybody here that you can inspire to share with us something? Shachar. Rabbi Litvin. We have Rabbi Litvin with us on Clubhouse from Kentucky. All right. Oh. Oh, Rabbi Litvin.
With this broader understanding of the Ma Nishtana, I think it makes more sense to me now why we don't all follow the custom. It's much more customary in mystical households, Hasidic households, Kabbalistic households, for everyone to say the Ma Nishtana rather than just the kids to ask.
Right.
I see that way more from this mystical view, how it's not just the kids asking questions, how we all need to ask them.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Very, very important point. Thank you, Rabbi Litvin. Right, from that mystical point of view, it's our journey. It's not, obviously it's cute to hear the kids say it. And, that's what we do traditionally, starting with the youngest and moving up. But ultimately, we all need to say it or sing it together. And so actually, that's something that we do. And I'm sure in most households is afterwards, everybody together. We actually also have a custom to say it in Yiddish. Tate, ich will bei dir fragen für Kashas. Father, I want to ask of you the 4 questions. Vier Kashas, as it's called in Yiddish. And then each phrase said in the Hebrew and translated into the Yiddish. And it's actually beautiful. Yeah, it's very heartwarming and great. Eric, wanted to share something, please.
Yeah, so I'll ask and thank you for allowing me on. And I had a question. So I maybe just work it's asking your comment on this. I recall learning a long time ago that why is this night different from all other nights? That the night actually represents our galus, represents us being cast out. And why is this one so much longer than all the other ones? This is an extremely long, an arduous one. And see your thoughts and comments on that.
Absolutely, it is this exile, this galus is a very long and arduous one, and that's the message over here on how we can get out of it by following the path of the 4 questions that are in the end 4 levels, 4 worlds on how we evolve through this teachings. But that is the painful question of the Ma Nishtana. Yeah, absolutely. On one hand, it's a beautiful thing of the children asking, and parents having and grandparents having great nachas, great pleasure to see how it's carried on the next generation. But on the other hand, the deeper meaning over here is that this is a long night that we have gone through, a long and bitter exile, and it's long overdue redemption. Mashiach now. Thank you for bringing that up and sharing that, Eric. Much appreciated. So Eric, maybe what did you do last year for the Seder? Was it a small one with just family? What was it?
Yeah, it was very small. My kids were with me. I think the first night I had my children with me. And then the second night was just my girlfriend and I. And I don't think it's going to be any better this year as far as when I say better. I think it'll just be because where I'm at, we're still in a very severe lockdown here. Yeah,
we're also that way. We have 8 o'clock curfew here in Quebec, in Montreal. So yeah, okay. We know what that means. But yet, as I mentioned on the outset, last year was just me and my wife, and it was amazing. Now I can't say that that's what we want to do every year, but it was an amazing experience. We weren't rushed. We were just sharing ideas, a flow of ideas back and forth. It was really something. All right, we have Reb Rafael. Oh, please share, or Arik.
I was brought up to the stage, but right now I really just want to listen.
Okay.
I just took the invitation because I didn't want to insult you, Straw.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Arik. Do you want to share something? Or Yitzchak? Oh, we have Rabbi Litvin again, please.
Just listening.
All right. So whoever would like to share. Rabbi Bernath, tell us about your experience last year. And
I was deep into COVID. I don't have very good memory of last year's experience, though. I did join my family for the Seder, and my kids, when we started the Seder, they said, "This is really strange. We've never just had a Seder with just our family, and we don't know what to do."
They need a real guidance, huh? Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, definitely strange times, but strange experiences bring sometimes wonderful experiences. All right, anybody else question or something to share of their Pesach, their 4 questions that they've asked or been a part of?
I remember.
Herschel, go ahead.
I remember Pesach at my grandparents' house on St. Urban Street in 1955 around. I was very, very young. I said the fair kashtas in Yiddish, or my brother did it, but usually it was me because I was older. And I remember the Haggadot. They were very colorful, and it made a great impression on a small child of the Red Sea parting and all the characters. It was like a movie. And then I was really, when I saw a glass of wine shaking for Elijah, I really believed that Elijah was there, because my maternal grandparents were traditionally religious or observant. And that Pesach with my grandparents made a great impression on me. Everything was so meaningful and colorful. But last year was very lonely. I was all alone. It was a virtual Seder with myself. And I hope this year will be different. It's only in 3 weeks. Pesach is so fast, coming up so quickly. I hope that we'll be able to get together again and have a real Seder with real people in real time. That's my hope for this year.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Rabbi Israel.
I'd love to press you a bit on this idea of questioning in Judaism, because I think that somewhere along the lines, maybe, I don't know, in the 50s and the 60s, what we call modern Judaism, there's been this idea that, you should not be questioning, just accept. And here we see, and I was talking to a bunch of university students, and I asked them, what's the most important holiday on the Jewish calendar? And, they all had a different opinion, Hanukkah, but I said, that any holiday that would be around Hanukkah would be an important holiday because people would it's the right time of year. And then they said Yom Kippur. And I said, okay, Yom Kippur, what's the most important prayer? And some of them said Kol Nidre. I said, okay, Kol Nidre, what are the next words? Nobody knew the next words. And then I said, Ma Nishtana, and they said, Halayla Hazeh.
Very good.
And it is, I believe, the quintessential, so across all spectrums of Judaism, traditional and not traditional, you ask a child, they'll be able to tell you, say Ma Nishtana, many of them will be able to say Halayla Hazeh. And so it's become the most known Jewish or Hebrew passage.
Very true.
And I just wonder about that. If this is something that needs to be spoken about for our time, that the most known Hebrew passage is one of questioning. And I know that
there are great Tartaras to come from that.
And I always talk to my kids about, the famous line from Isidore Isaac Rabi. When they asked him how he became a Nobel Prize winner, he said when he came home, his mother would always ask him, instead of saying, was your day good? She would ask him, did you ask any good questions today? And that's really part of Judaism on so many levels. I'd love to hear what you think of that.
Amazing insight. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. It's, fundamental. And think about it. Here is after the first paragraph of the Helach Manya, the first thing is the questioning. And who's doing the questioning? Not the adults, the adults with great intelligence, perhaps, and they were going to have a very deep, question. It's the children and others. We got to teach from a young age to question, because which is interesting to tie in with the idea of night. Why do we question? Why would, if something is obvious to you, you don't ask a question. If you have clarity, things are bright, like the sun is shining, which is actually somewhat shining here in Montreal right now, somewhat. When things are clear to you, like the sun shines on a beautiful day, you don't ask a question because you have clarity. It's because when you don't have clarity, you ask a question. And that is important in Jewish teachings, and Jewish path is not about merely follow blindly without questioning. Follow, but question. You gotta question, because in the question means there's a confusion. There's a moment of darkness of night because you don't have clarity. And the whole point is to come to clarity. And therefore that fits in with the Ma Nishtana so beautifully that, where, Ma Nishtana halayla zeh, what's different about this exile, this darkness, this confusion. So we have more questions now than ever. Why? Because the light that is going to emerge is going to be a greater light than ever. So we appreciate light when we come from darkness. So when we have a good question, did you ask a good question, like a deep, meaningful, challenging question? A greater light's going to emerge. A greater understanding will come out. A greater connection will come out. And therefore, absolutely, this is fundamental to Judaism. Thank you for bringing that up. Beautiful, beautiful point.
Just to add or to build on it, do you think there are conditions for questioning? Like the Ma Nishtana is very specific about how it's questioned and who it's questioned to. Are there conditions in Judaism for questioning, or can you just question openly in any way?
Wow. So excellent question. Amazing question. So, let's take it from the Ma Nishtana. We're asking the question on God, right? Ultimately, is you're asking your Father, and it's your Father in heaven. You're asking God. So, is there a parameter to ask? So, think about it. If you're asking about, some medical issue, pandemic times, and you're asking some medical issue. So you're not going to ask your car mechanic. You're going to ask the doctor, right? You're going to ask the person who knows, who has the background. So same thing. It depends what your question is, and you need to go to the right person to ask it. If you're going to go ask a friend, are you really asking a question, or you're just asking a question for the sake of a question, but not for the answer? So two things. When you're asking a question, you have to be sincere that you want from the darkness to come to light. You want clarity. You're not asking it just to, put it in someone's face, why this, to try to, you have an agenda to try to prove something. You really want to have an answer to something. So that's the first thing. And then you have to go to the right person, who's the one who could give you answers. Don't go to your car mechanic for your medical health.
A point to push back on there.
Sure.
I think, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Elliot.
I think just looking at American Jewry overall, the state of it right now, I think there are lots of Jews who grew up like myself in a conservative background in the Southeast, who decide, no, I'm not going to ask the person who I know knows the answer. I'm not an Orthodox rabbi, for example. I'm going to ask everybody. And okay, so we think certain people, when you go through society, you learn to think certain people who look a certain way or who have certain qualifications, they definitely know the answers. And that makes sense for things like medical questions. But I think a lot of people, just your average, maybe affiliated or unaffiliated Jew, in different movements in America, decides, no, I'm not just going to go to the Orthodox rabbi to answer a question, maybe not a specific thing about halacha, but some broad thing of inspiration or whatnot, but I'm going to ask everybody and figure it out myself. I'm not going to accept what tradition has led to. I'm not going to accept the Shulchan Aruch or whatever rules the rest of the world tells me to. I'm going to find my own path, and if that comes to mean I'm talking to people who don't look like they have answers to what I'm curious about, somehow I'll find the answer through everybody collectively.
Right. I hear that.
I personally think, yeah, okay, you should be asking the person who has the expertise and the certification and whatnot. And that's what I do personally. But I think there are a lot of people who choose other paths.
Well, of course, I mean, the choice is anybody's and everybody's what path they want to choose. I guess the question might, another parameter perhaps then might be, am I just choosing the path that, that is comfortable for me, or am I choosing, what is the right thing to do? It might be. Now, of course, every person has to answer that question for themselves. I can't answer it for someone else. But I think that's an important thing. And when I wake up in the morning, I do some exercise, and I got to tell you, that's not a path I want to take. I can't say I love doing the exercise, but I know that it's not what I want to do, but I do it because I know I need to do that. So we all have a path in life that sometimes we just do what's comfortable, convenient, and autopilot, and just, getting answers that I want to hear rather than answers that might be the right ones that are necessary for me in my growth and my, healthy journey in life. So, that just to add that element, I think would be important to appreciate. Any thoughts on that?
Can I say something about the asking of questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Reed.
Please.
Go ahead.
Well, I think what I love about the Seder also is that it allows small children to learn how to ask questions, because they don't always know what to ask, how to ask, and it gives a really beautiful platform for small children to learn how to ask. And what I noticed on Seder evenings with my nieces, they really want to learn and know everything. They actually also just asked very random questions, which was really funny, because they were really looking for questions. They learned a lot in Jewish school, but they also just asked very random questions. And I think it gave like a very light note to it, that it's also very important not to learn how to ask questions. That's sometimes a skill that is really important to learn first.
Very true. Right. In other words, as we mentioned, that you really want to have an answer rather than you have an agenda that you're asking your question with, and that you're looking for clarity. You're looking for, some truth. And absolutely, too many questions today are really, motivated with an agenda, and are not honest questions. But and you're right. If that's the path that a person's taking, that they're really looking for answers and they're seeking that, then that's something we want to instill in our kids from a young age, and that's the Seder, exactly.
And it's huge in beyond mystical and spiritual realms. I mean, I'll be a lawyer in a few months, and we spend hundreds of hours in law school learning not just what's the information you need from your clients or whatnot, but what is the precise way to ask? So I just totally agree with Uri.
Right. All right. Oh, good luck in finishing off in law school.
Thanks. It's pretty, it's a given at this point. I'm not too worried.
Great. We're going to have one last comment or question or discussion. If anybody has something to Eric, I don't know if you wanted to say something, please do.
Yeah, it's an interest. So you brought out a good point, but this, and kind of building off that, like what Elliot was saying as well, aren't these 4 questions though loaded? We already know what the answers are. This is like a self-driven process, and so I've done sales for a good chunk of my life, and so you're very careful with the questions that you ask your client. This one we already know the answers to. Isn't this a loaded process then?
Excellent question. So have you ever asked a question in your life and then maybe a year later you ask the same question, but you're in a different headspace, you're in a different space altogether, and therefore now the way you're asking the question is a lot more profound? Before it was more simple. Now it's the same issue, same question, and you're asking again, but you're asking from a different place. So hopefully every year when we come to the Seder, as we call it here in Canada, Seder night in Canada, which is a playoff hockey night in Canada. That was always a competition, as kids, there was hockey and there was a Seder, but it's Seder night in Canada and throughout the world for that matter. And hopefully that this year when we ask the Ma Nishtana, we're, based on what we learned today together, for you and for all of us, we're going to be asking that question on a different level, on a deeper, more profound level. And therefore, hopefully the answer will also be deeper and more profound as we grow. So I hope that's a great way to end off this amazing session. This will continue, God willing, tomorrow, 9:30 in the morning for the Tanya of the day and 12:45 for the Hagaddah, the next portion of the Hagaddah that we will share together on Facebook, on Zoom, and on Clubhouse. So I want to thank Rabbi Bernath, who has been guiding me. I'm a novice over here on Clubhouse, and I thank you for guiding me and making things happen. And for everybody that joined and expressed a question, expressed a comment, shared something, it's amazing and beautiful. Wishing you all a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
How, folks, give me your feedback on what we just went through over here. Diane, how was it? Tim?
It was enjoyable. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of things I don't really know, so it's new to me.
Okay. Tim?
Same with me. That was good information from a broad perspective from different people.
Great. Linda and Denise, Robert, Michael.
Amazing.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay.
I loved it, Rabbi. I thought it was great that we got a bigger pool of people with more things to learn about and things that we didn't think about. So just thank you, Yasha Koach.
Okay, thank you. God bless. Be well.